Welcome to the Writing with Purpose podcast, where I, Anna Woolliscroft, chat with fellow writers and outdoor enthusiasts about how we can embrace creativity and curiosity to live a life full of adventure that doesn't feel like hard work. I delve into exploratory conversations about my two loves in life, writing and nature connection, as part of my mission to share the well-being benefits they both bring. It's wonderful to have you here today. On today's Writing with Purpose podcast, I'm chatting with Heather, owner of Bowland Editorial, about editing, proofreading, languages, and making time to venture outside. So, hi Heather, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for agreeing to be my guest. I'm looking forward to chatting about all things outdoors, nature connection, writing, reading, because I know they are loves of yours as well as mine. So you've got quite a colourful background, really. Do you want to sort of just explain a little bit about, your original career?
Yeah. So thanks for having me, by the way. But yeah, so I have a military background. So I joined the military when I was 20. Not probably something that anyone actually, when I was at school, probably thought I would do. It wasn't, I'd never been a cadet. I just kind of, went through school, had no idea, and then just had this vision that I wanted to join the military. So I joined the Royal Air Force. And yeah, so I did 13 years in the Air Force.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. And it went by in a flash. And it was, actually part of the reason that I joined, I think, was because I'd always been really sporty and liked doing kind of adventurous stuff. And I saw that there was loads of opportunity to do that in the military. So that was probably one of my motivations. I think it was. So yeah, so I served for 13 years and then I left about 5 years ago. And I have worked in defence industry, but I also have my own business, which is kind of a sideline, which maybe might take off to be something full-time, hopefully, in the future. But yeah, so I run a business called Bowland Editorial. So I proofread and edit copy, basically. And I also do a bit of freelance transcription as well, because my background is in languages. So I do a bit of transcription work as well.
Fabulous. And how many different languages can you speak?
Well, my main language from when I was in was Arabic. And then I did a French A-level, so I could speak a bit of French. I can kind of understand it and get by if I needed to, but I wouldn't say I'm particularly strong. But then I've been teaching myself Italian as well.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm a bit of
I think languages is one of those things that if you're interested in it and you can pick it up, it's a bit like reading or writing. You've always got that love of wanting to, pick up a new language, like you would pick up a new book.
Yeah.
That's my perception of it anyway.
Yeah, it's funny really, because when I was at school, I've got an older sister she's 3 years older than me, and she was always kind of the language one, if that makes sense. I was kind of the sporty one, and she was more, she did a degree in French actually, and she still, uses the French now. And so I always kind of viewed myself as not being a language person. And then when I ended up being a linguist, it kind of took me by surprise a little bit. But I think having kind of a base in a language, if you will, so having done A-level French, but I also think it's very aptitude based and absolutely not a reflection of intelligence, by the way. Because I know loads of really, really clever people that really struggle with languages, and it's just one of those things. I think you have an aptitude or not. But I have a theory that learning a language that's a different script, so Arabic being an example, is, I think if you can read music, that helps. Just because, when you read music any kind of instructions are actually in Italian.
Yeah.
But just the fact that you're reading notes, which obviously isn't a written form, as in it's not words. Don't know. I just have a theory. Yeah, that's the theory. Probably never to be proven, but
it makes a lot of sense though. And I suppose when you were describing that, I almost wondered whether it was more of a visual person maybe that would get that, or somebody that was used to maybe mathematical symbols, and perhaps that they were able to understand it or maybe pick it up a little bit more. And I always at college, I wanted to, so after I'd finished my A-levels and then I was working, I can't remember where, I wanted to go back to college to study Egyptology and the hieroglyphs, and because I was really fascinated about, I suppose the kind of look and feel of it all, and how, how creative it was almost. I didn't end up studying for it because there was only 2 of us that were interested, so it never went ahead. But you've encouraged me to maybe look at that again. But yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? All the, language and communication and reading and writing, and how now you set up your business for the proofreading and the editing, and that's with your background. Do you tend to find that that's more on a technical level perhaps, and with the transcriptions, and maybe it's sort of creative writing perhaps?
A bit of a mixture, to be honest. I mean, I've done a lot of stuff that I've worked with. Certainly transcription tends to be kind of government or police related audio, but on the proofreading and editing side is a bit of a mixture. So I started off definitely doing more, not necessarily technical, but sort of defense and aviation related. So it might be a book that's written by someone, but it's a non-fiction book about aviation in the 1900s or whatever. But I'm moving slightly and branching out, so not doing that stuff because that's kind of my background and that's what I know, but doing a bit of other stuff in terms of more like outdoory type stuff. And I've got a friend who is she's just done a master's actually in sustainable tourism, so I've just proofread her dissertation actually for a master's, which was really interesting. So I'm kind of moving slightly into that area as well, so that tends to be kind of a more creative side of things. And I have done a couple of fiction, I've done one fiction book for somebody, and also a book, but it's actually non-fiction because it's basically a memoir. So it kind of reads like it's creative in terms of its output, but it's actually non-fiction. That makes sense.
Based on somebody's experiences.
And
do you prefer that bigger piece, because proofreading books and dissertations and that, they're chunky pieces, aren't they, compared to for maybe a blog article or a series of emails, for example?
I mean, to be honest, I quite enjoy both. It depends how much time you've got, and quite often you might take on a bigger project, so a book or a dissertation or something, and then you can still slot in some smaller stuff. But if someone else came to you and said, can you edit my book, you wouldn't do 2 at the same time. You would say, I can do it 2 months later or whatever. But smaller stuff like blog posts or CVs and stuff, you can kind of just slot them in because they don't take a huge amount of time, and don't distract you necessarily too much from a big project.
You can make a cuppa, can't you? Sit there for hours and do something to get your head really stuck into something. And I am more of a writer rather than proofreading and sometimes copy editing side. But I totally lost my train of thought there of what I was going to say. I sort of perceive that chunkier project as being something that you would come to, and you need to have that train of thought with you all the time.
Yeah.
Even when you have breaks and things, you've kind of got to come back to it and still be on that train of thought. So I'm just picking up how, whether they're repeating themselves or they're using the same sort of tone throughout. And I can imagine that's quite a task with a big piece.
Yeah, because you have to kind of almost immerse yourself in it to then be able, like you say, to pick out whether there's word repetition or whether there's discrepancies. In one chapter, you might have written that a certain character has got blonde hair, and then later down the line they've got brown hair, or that's maybe a bit obvious, but those kind of things that are maybe
they put a colour on it somewhere
and just slight inconsistencies that do happen because as a writer you wouldn't necessarily write every chapter in order, or you might write some chapters and then go away and think about it and come back, and you might just almost forget, and then it's hard then as a writer to look back on your own work because you're kind of expecting to see what you're expecting, if that makes sense. So it's
you already know in your head what you're trying to do. You can, the mind's quite good at that, isn't it? Just sort of casting over something and not really paying that much attention to it because it knows what should be there, and then if it's a mistake it's easy to spot. Hence the importance of proofreading. How do you stay creative then?
Well, I've always been a bit of a poetry writer. Now I'm certainly not published, and I've never really done anything with my poetry, but that's kind of that's my creativity thing, really. I've never really been particularly great at art or anything. So my kind of way of letting out any creativity tends to be through poetry, really. And it's quite often I will think of a poem. So I don't ever go, right, I'm going to sit down today and write a poem. That never happens. I just get inspired by stuff. And then if I remember it when I get home, I'll write it down. And if I don't remember it, then I might write it down when I do remember it, or it just, goes somewhere. But yeah, I tend to be kind of inspired by the outdoors, really. So, I've written poems about bluebells and daffodils and things, in spring when you see things popping up. And I love that. I love watching things grow and knowing that kind of nicer weather's on the way. And so I'll just be out for a walk with the dog or out for a run, and just something will pop in my head. By the time I get home, I've written a poem in my head. And
you remember it when you get back?
Yeah, mostly. I try to. But yeah, so that's kind of my creative outlet, really.
That's great. I totally resonate with everything that you've said there. I think writing for me, because I journal quite a lot, and also I'm in the process of writing certain projects, one of them being a non-fiction book, and then I've got some ideas for fiction books as well. So that's sort of my outlet as well. And I think you hear a lot about people singing, dancing, drawing, painting as sort of an outlet of creativity, but writing actually isn't touched on that much. We're aware of authors, and I think poetry has definitely had more exposure over the last few years as being something that people do in that situation. But I think it's almost like the lost cousin, if you like, of creative outlets.
I think it's almost taken for granted as well, to be honest. I think you don't really, unless you kind of work in that world, you don't almost appreciate all the effort that goes into someone writing a book necessarily. You just kind of read it and go, oh, that was good.
And then move on to something else. I think you're right there. Not really thought about it from that point of view.
But yeah, when I was a child, I remember definitely wrote a poem as a child, and actually it was all about kind of, the smell of flowers and ducks swimming on a pond and things like that. It was all kind of outdoorsy stuff. And I do recall trying to write a book as a child as well. So when I was younger, I was absolutely obsessed with horses. Now I still like horses. I don't have one, but if someone gave me one, I'd have it.
We put that in the show notes.
If anyone's got one going for free.
Contact Heather.
But yeah, I was really intent as a child on writing a book about a horse, and so but basically all that ever really materialized was the name of the book, which was the name of the horse in the book, which was Forrester. And I wrote and I designed a front cover which was absolutely awful. I think I discovered it as an adult and went, wow, that's just, it was a really typical cartoon drawing of a horse with like stick legs and like a round face.
Not quite proportionate.
Yeah, not a great cover. And I think I probably wrote, the first paragraph of the first chapter, and then I didn't really go anywhere else. But yeah,
keeping it though.
Well, and I don't know if I still got it, to be honest. It's probably in the bin now, but but yeah, it did materialize somewhere at my mum and dad's house, I think. But yeah, I mean, and I've never, to be honest, really, I've never thought about writing a book since. Certainly not a fiction book. Sometimes I think I could write a non-fiction book, as in maybe a kind of a memoir about, stuff that I've done or things like that. But I've never actually, or just kind of, I don't even know, like not a walking guide, like a really official one, but a kind of a more diarized one, if you will.
Of your adventures.
Out
and about, because you run as well, don't you?
You
mentioned about having the inspiration of going outside and then having that poem and coming back again, and I quite often do that. If I feel stuck, then I'll go for a walk, and I try and do it every day, although it just doesn't always happen. But undoubtedly, when I've gone outside, something pops in, and I've got a notebook usually. And sometimes if I feel as though I need to write it down, I'll write it down. And then if nothing else, it's a social media post or something like that, metaphor of life or something that I've seen on my journey, that I can then turn that into a bit of a lesson learned, or a thought prompt or something like that, that I can share with people. So I think just getting outside is great to just sort of almost break down some of the blocks that you have and kickstart that creativity that you have.
Definitely.
Ideas, that sort of thing. It's very powerful.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I kind of, I think just being outside, it's so powerful in that it kind of clears your mind of everything else, and I think that's why your creativity is kind of invigorated, because you kind of stop thinking about day to day, I need to put a wash on, or groom the dog or whatever. And I think that's maybe not for everybody, but that's kind of how I work, is that I don't think about stuff like that when I'm outside. And then I just and I try to take everything in. I mean, I'm quite fortunate where we live, that we live really close to a beautiful park, which is always, whatever time of year, is always stunning. And so, that's kind of an inspiration in itself. But just the countryside around as well is beautiful. So especially if you go for a run, because then you go further. if you're just going for a walk from the house. But then being so close to the Lake District as well, I just find the beauty of the Lake District just so inspiring, really.
It's fabulous. I was up there last year. I think we went June. It was around about the Jubilee time. And I can't remember which lake it was now. We stayed near Coniston, although this particular lake wasn't Coniston Lake. And I just remember thinking we could be in the Italian lakes here. The weather was perfect, and the water was so blue, contrasting with the greenery around that. It was absolutely stunning. There really is some beautiful parts of of England as a country that I think, you know, and living where you are, and I'm quite close to the Peak District, so we are very fortunate that those areas aren't too close to us. I realise it's not that, you know, it's not as easily accessible for everybody, but, you know, having these green spaces and little pockets of colourful parks and things is wonders for your mental health as well, and just
absolutely
relax. And I think you mentioned something before that I thought it's you sort of, when you're outside, it's quite a present time. You're not thinking about washing the dog or, you know, putting out the washing or whatever that is. It's almost like that, the mundane jobs and the logic of the day kind of drifts away a little bit, and very mindful, I suppose.
I think that's actually a good, I've never really thought of it as being mindful, but you're absolutely right. Kind of, I mean, and there's a reason why, you know, when people talk about mindful things, or, you know, when businesses put in mindful rooms or creative thinking spaces, they're always green, aren't they? Always.
Absolutely.
And that, you know, and you can kind of see why, because, you know, the majority of the outdoors is green. I mean, I'm looking out the window now and I've got a red Acer tree, so that kind of going against the grain here, but everything else is green.
They are beautiful though, they really stand out.
But just kind of, I think that you know, there's so many different shades of green, but they just it's kind of instills a kind of peace, I think, a green colour.
Green's my favourite colour. Is it yours?
It is. I like purple as well, but green, definitely. Green. It's always been green.
It's strange. I've got a greenish top on today, but I don't have a great deal of green. I wear a lot of black, really. I probably want to colour myself up.
I don't.
I'll look a bit more. But you're making an interesting point about the green room. I've never really thought about that before. But then thinking about it, my first job was at Alton Towers. Well, my first job actually was cleaning videotapes for my dad. My first proper job.
What are they?
What is a videotape? Yeah, I don't know.
If you don't know what a videotape is, look it up.
You're not as old as we are. Showing my age there. So I worked at Alton Towers. That was my first proper job, and we had a green room there, which was just the break room for having sandwiches and that. But it was not a great room, and I seem to remember that, because I've never smoked, but we had to walk through the smoking room to get into our room, which is just
nice. But
for other young people that might be listening or watching, smoking was abandoned in public spaces. This is turning into be a reminiscing conversation, isn't it? But so sort of back on track a little bit. I mean, it's part of my reasons for talking to people like yourself is sort of like-minded, and we enjoy reading, writing, great outdoors, of, you know, ways to kind of enrich our life a little bit, really, those things. So have you got any sort of takeaways for people of sort of how maybe to get the most out of being outside, or if they're writing or they need some sort of, you know, inspiration to have as that creative outlet? Is there anything that you want to share?
Well, firstly, my life motto is, so there's obviously the really common phrase that's think outside the box. Well, mine is think outside, no box required. So
no boundaries whatsoever, just whatever comes. Brilliant.
But actually outside, like physically outside. And I think, you know, not everyone's necessarily really close to, you know, wide open spaces, but even in, you know, central London, there's some beautiful parks, there's little pockets of green. And so I would just say, you know, if people need a bit of inspiration, find something like that and just kind of soak it up. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to go for a 10-mile hike or, you know, walk around a huge park that's acres big, but just kind of getting outside and immersing yourself in the outdoors and just notice things, notice, especially this time of year, notice when there's new bulbs coming up, or notice when the ferns are uncurling, which I absolutely love, by the way. I love watching them. And, just notice new flowers on that are sprouting or whatever. And that in itself is so kind of good for you just mentally. But if you kind of take all that in, and that will make you forget life in general, really, then you might kind of find yourself a little bit more inspired, rather than thinking, right, if you are a writer, I think sometimes it's difficult to maybe get inspiration, and you might think, right, I'm on a time scale, or I want to get this done by this time. Right, I'm going to sit at my desk and I'm going to write for the next 3 hours or something. But you might just sit there and have a complete block. So if you can just get outside, even if it's for 10-15 minutes, just to kind of soak up the outdoors and forget about anything else, I feel like that would probably help in terms of kind of reinvigorating your creativity.
Yeah, definitely. I think you said some key words there, really. Immersing yourself, soak up, in that different setting almost, and not being inside and having the constraints of the four walls around you. I mean, that happens to me a lot, to sort of sit down and say, right, I've got half a day, I'm going to do this. And inevitably that never happens, because I've almost sort of told myself that I've got to do this. And I some kind of subconscious level, I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. But it does help just to get outside and almost free yourself of, you must do this, that kind of narrative almost, to go outside and immerse yourself in outer elements, really. And just, I think that the word notice as well is quite powerful, because I see that many people these days that are walking along the side of the road, or they are in a wood or something, and they're staring at their mobile phones, and they're not connected to anything around them. They're connected to a piece of something, in the phone, which is nothing to do with where they are at the time. It's a shame, really. So I think, soaking up the outdoors, immersing yourself in what's there, not what's kind of in here almost.
And not what anyone else is doing as well, because I think that's what you just said actually about the technology thing. It's just, it has gone crazy. And you see people, in absolutely beautiful parts of the world, the country, people go to the Lake District and they're not actually bothered about going for a walk and having some exercise or immersing themselves. They just want to take a picture, put on social media. They'll drive somewhere, get out, take a picture and get back in.
And I do the picture thing, but I don't just get out.
Absolutely. So do I. I'm not really a selfie person, to be honest, but absolutely take pictures. But then I wouldn't then post it on social media right there and then. If I was going to post it on social media at all, to be honest, I might save the picture for a background for a post or something, or but then people get the phone out and they post it, and then they've got, I'll just scroll and have a look, and before you know it, half an hour's gone and they've not actually seen any. They're not in the present. They're looking at what everyone else is doing, which is really unhealthy, actually.
Just being at one with yourself almost, and everything that's around you. Or, quite often I go out with my partner and we don't talk that much when we go out on walks and things, because both of us are just enjoying it. He said to me the other day, he says, just started to notice trees, and I really like trees. And I said, actually, trees have got a lot of character, particularly the old ones, because they're all gnarled, aren't they? And I went past one with a friend who went running yesterday, and I'm not quite sure what tree it was, because half of it had been chopped down. So I think just parts of it were still alive, but it wasn't great. But it was huge. The trunk was massive, so it was a really ancient tree. And then it had got some hawthorn growing all around it, kind of giving it a hug. And then it had got some holes underneath, so there were some creatures that had obviously, I don't know what they would be, were using it as a home. So this tree had got, it's almost like the tree of stories of that particular
and that's probably what things like that is what have inspired things like, I can't even remember the title of it now, but I used to read in the Blyton books as a child, and she wrote about the magic faraway tree or something, was it?
Oh, I don't know.
Exactly what you've just
said. And Secret 7. I used to read those.
Yeah, those as well. Yeah, but there was one. I think they were for slightly younger children. Maybe I'm sure it was a magic faraway tree. Anyway, what that tree you've just described just brought that back to me. So that's probably what in the inspiration for those books.
Sounds like.
I hope I haven't just made that up, but I'm sure. I'm sure she did write that.
No, there'll be a memory there somewhere that you've just pulled out from. Yeah. So yeah, there's all these things, isn't there, outside? I suppose that kind of conclude really. There's all these things outside that can, as well as having the mental health benefits for us as individuals, and help how we communicate with other people and in the daily world and what have you. But there's so much inspiration to be found outside, and if you're stuck inside with your job, whether you write or whether you do something else, it's important, I think, from just a point of view of refreshing things, resetting things, kickstarting creativity, ideas, to just change your scenery.
Yeah,
get outside, great, but just change your scenery as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Brilliant. Well, it's been really, really fascinating to talk to you, and we reminisced a little bit, which was great. So I'll write up some show notes and things. So and we'll share how people can connect with you. But is there a maybe a social media platform or a better way for people to connect with you if they want to?
Well, I mean, I do have Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn, so any of those I'm on as me, but I'm also on as Bowland Editorial on all of those as well. So
great, brilliant. Well, people can reach out to you there. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to today's Writing with Purpose podcast. Having conversations with fellow writers or adventure enthusiasts brings two of my biggest loves in life together: writing and nature connection. I've been a copywriter and content creator for 23 years, but my passion is writing for well-being, and I'm on a mission to share the benefits that putting pen to paper has for personal wellness with as many people as possible. If you want to learn more about writing for your well-being and journaling techniques, please connect with me in my Facebook group, Journaling with Anna.